Hi guys, my name is Alex, and today we're going to talk about the question, what should we teach in schools? So first thing I want to start you off with is kind of my background in this. I've talked to a lot of professors and teachers and kind of had multi-hour long conversations with students to find out what they're thinking on these topics. A lot of them have been friends and family members. And then my experience is as a student in elementary, middle school, high school, and college, and also as someone who's worked in colleges and taught students with disabilities and also been a tutor for elementary, middle, high school, and college. So I'm coming to this with my opinions, but also with something I believe is kind of grounded in multiple people's beliefs. Um, so the first question is, what is the purpose of schooling? And I think we can kind of crack it down to a few things. The first is self-sufficiency. If you can't survive, you can't do anything else for society. You can't do anything else in your life. So that's got to be the first thing, is to make sure that you can take care of yourself when you are no longer living under your parents or someone else's roof. Second thing is, theoretically, to be a good citizen, to have a good understanding of how your government and your country works and what your role is in it. And then the third part is for you to be a good worker. So someone who can contribute to society, help move it along, make sure that we all have power, have electricity, have new devices, have whatever. Those are technically the basics. And those are things that we're not even meeting. But then, probably most importantly, is actually giving us an education on how the world works and how to form opinions and understand the world around us. That's a difficult thing to all put into one system, but I can guarantee you can do better than we're doing now. So, first thing I want to talk about is what is even in the bare minimum, right? And so, I'm checking my list, hold on. But yeah, so we should be able to take care of ourselves, right? So that means we should at the very least know how to manage our health, which should probably include cooking and cleaning. And we should learn things about some degree of medicine and how our bodies work, because when you go to a doctor, you have to be able to explain those issues to them, right? And a doctor is something that everyone's going to see. Everyone is going to need to produce food and consume food. So these are things that we should be teaching because they apply to everyone. And we spend a lot of time on advanced literature and mathematics and sciences, and while those are useful for us getting a job, that's not something that everyone's going to use. So I think it makes sense as a bare minimum to start with something that everyone needs to know. So then we work up from there. If you can take care of yourself, if you can make sure you're getting enough sleep at night, if you know what you actually need to be putting in your body, the next step is, what do I do with this knowledge? Now that I'm a functioning human, how do I interact with people around me? So that goes into things like, how do we teach social skills? How do we have good conversations? But how do we have business-oriented conversations as well? Like when I was in the beginning of my undergrad, one of the things that they taught us was how to write professional emails. And it seems like a no-brainer, but that's important. And I wouldn't be surprised if people found it useful to know how to write text messages and have good phone conversations, because those are all things we're going to need to do, is to talk to other humans. And at the end of the day, a government, a country, a nation, a society is built around the people in it. So if we can't interact with one another, and we have all these systems that are governmental and educational, whatever, to make us interact a certain way, then they should tell us how they want us to interact. It almost seems like a no-brainer. But yeah, so it goes into social aspects. How do we communicate with one another? How do we have healthy relationships? That's really important, because there's still high incidences of domestic abuse, of violence, of school shootings. These tend to be linked to the inability to communicate, and then it festers and explodes. So it's important that we learn how to communicate what we're thinking without violence, without anger, because we're going to need to for the rest of our lives. And I think a great example of this is family members who wind up being very angry, and they bring their anger home from work. And it's like, if you can maintain yourself in the company of other people who you're working with, you should be able to do it around your family members who theoretically you care more about. So communication is very, very important. You will spend your entire life talking to people and writing to people and listening to people. You need to know how to interpret and respond to that information. Then another aspect is how to be theoretically a good citizen and get a job. So if you want to be a good citizen, you have to understand what it requires to be a citizen. You have to know how to process information to make decisions like going to vote. you have to know how to pay your taxes so that you don't wind up defaulting on it or winding up committing tax fraud even accidentally, which does happen. You want to make sure that you know how to handle your residency papers, like make sure that you can actually get a house, how to manage a loan, because these are things that most of us are going to deal with. It's having to take out money from the bank, it's having to go and buy a house, or buy an apartment, or work on something financially related. So we need a good understanding of finances. So that's another pillar that we need to be working on. And that's something that a handful of us might get to do. So my friends did economics degrees and they got to understand it thoroughly. But many of us, if we take a single economics class in high school that isn't very thorough, are not going to come out with a solid understanding. I needed help for years to learn how to actually do my taxes properly because I didn't want to make a mistake and wind up literally committing a crime just for not knowing how to do this stuff. And as an extension of that, we should be talking about the laws, right? That, mind you, are always changing. So to be married to the law doesn't make a lot of sense, but it should teach us the fundamentals of laws. What are things that are going to apply to most of us? For example, if you're in the United States, many of us will probably drive a car within the next 10 years of our life. So it's pretty important that we know how to do that. And if people are getting licenses and they want to put cars on the road and reduce traffic fatalities, which mind you are over 30,000 a year in the US, then it's important that we know how to drive well. So yet again, another instance of something that's like not taught, maybe optional in some places, but is definitely important to understand, right? Even understanding road rules, like if you are a biker, if you are someone who walks to places, where can you even go? How can you safely go? How do you not trespass on property accidentally? These are so important to know because they're going to apply to everyone. You know, even things like how much should you tip at a restaurant? Like if there are cultural standards, those are important too. Because if you want people to be able to maintain your culture, to be good Americans or good Europeans or good Germans, wherever you are, then they need to know what constitutes as being an American, what constitutes as being a German or an Italian or something. So you need to know how to act in your country. And someone would be better off teaching you than expecting your parents to. And that goes into an interesting segue, because before I get on to some of the more advanced topics, we need to talk about the fact that parents cannot teach you everything. Especially in America, you're spending in high school 7.5 hours a day at school. And then you'll probably stay after school to do at least one extracurricular activity. So whether it be band, or you're working on cars, or you're going to a job, or you're going to like an art club or something, you need to have your education come from these sources, because you're not going to get to spend a lot of time with your family. If you're getting 8 hours of sleep a night, you're going to be awake for about 16 hours a day. If you include travel time and time working and all this stuff, you'll spend 8 to 12 hours a day outside of your house. And the time that you're spending with your family is either spent bonding, or is spent, well, frequently, is spent bonding, or is spent kind of independently. So there's not a lot of time for your parents to teach you or your guardians to teach you what you need to know. So it is very important that these critical topics be taught in schools. And one of the things we talk about in America, and I think in a lot of other countries, especially on the note of civil rights and human rights, is the opportunity for equality. So something, I guess on that note, it's like not equality for everyone to have the same things that they earn, same amount that they earn, same job and everything, but it gives you the same opportunity to go and earn that job, right? And so if you're coming from a poor community where, I've heard this from students too many times, where you don't know the etiquette, the rules of how do you sit down and have a formal dinner with someone? How do you go to an interview? When, if you've been raised somewhat wealthier, you kind of know, you've been interacting with professionals your whole life who are like academics and who know how to have a formal conversation. And it can kind of be like gatekeeping, because it prevents people who were not born in a certain like social or wealth class from moving into a better position in life because they don't know the rules of the game. So teaching people the rules, and then furthermore teaching them the skills that they need to be able to advance their position in life. So that's like business, finance, engineering, and the list goes on, and we'll go into that. But talking about those things is incredibly important if we want our citizens to actually be functioning individuals. So yeah, and so what that means is that we can't expect parents or the household to teach people everything. And if the argument is that You go to school to learn how to become a professional. Like you learn math, science, history, and then you go home to learn how to take care of yourself. Those should almost be reversed if we're talking about the amount that you're going to use those skills. You need to take care of yourself. The job you work is variable, so you're not going to need every one of those skills. So we should be putting more emphasis on making sure people can take good care of themselves before we can move on. So the next thing we'll talk about is how to be a professional, right? A lot of us, if you're going to manual labor, you need to know how to interact with people. You need to know how to do a job that is rhythmic and working over and over again. So it's probably good that you at least get some physical activity if you're going to be working with it. If you're going to be working a technical skill like plumbing or as an electrician, you need to have some basic knowledge of circuits and how to manage plumbing. And what's interesting about those careers is that they apply to all of us because we're all going to have toilets in our houses. We're all going to have electricity in our houses, hopefully. And so we can't decide that those skills are something that only a handful of people need to know when, again, they're skills that apply to everyone. So we have to work from the inside out. What are the things that are closest to our survival and to our day-to-day life, and work outwards if we want to create healthy individuals that are actually useful in a society? And I think that's just so important, is that at the end of the day, if you want people to be useful to you, whether you're greedy or benevolent, you have to let them be able to take care of themselves. So again, maintaining a house, maintaining your apartment, if a toilet gets clogged, you need to know how to unclog it. And that's just a simple skill. You need to know how to fold laundry. And these might not all be taught in school, but you need to have some idea of what it takes to be self-sufficient. And so, move onwards, right, to professional skills that are more academic. So that's like engineering. If you go into the sciences, you become a biologist, a chemist, or you work with design, you go into like designing buildings and architecture, or you become a historian, you work as a secretary, you work as a teacher, you work literally most jobs. Anything you went to college for, chances are, is in this field, or if you even got like an associate's degree. Point being, the skills required for those jobs are, again, another level up of communication. You need to know how to read and write proficiently, as well as read and write in somewhat technical language for your field. Then you also probably need to know some amount of mathematics. We're all going to deal with money in our lives, so we need to know some basic amount of mathematics to be able to manage our money, manage finances, and to manage our wallets and budgets. And then we also need to know, these just kind of gradually overlap, but technology, right? We're all going to use a phone. Instead of having to call customer support and wait on the phone for hours to have them fix an issue, just teach us, how do phones work? How do computers work? How do dishwashers work? How do washing machines work? We're all going to use them. How do showers work? How do you fix like low water pressure? Just tighten a bolt. If it's that easy, why do you need to call someone and pay them $60 an hour to do it? These are skills that we can learn, and so we should be putting emphasis on them in schools. And then if we're talking about business, you need to know if you're going to be, like, there are many careers such as being an artist or being a freelancer or web designer or whatever that require you to be able to go out there and find new clients, figure out how to talk to them, do marketing, like promote your social media, maybe be a YouTuber. Like, these all fit together to help you form a successful career. And you don't want people who have spent all this time and money training for a career to then not be able to do it because they can't find the people to work for. And even at the simplest levels, when you're not going to be a freelancer, you need to know how to go to an interview. You need to know how to write a resume. And these are all very important. So again, and arguably one of the most important things, you need to know how to work with others. Teamwork is something that they emphasize a lot in my undergraduate degree. And teamwork is something that you will do in the professional world your entire life. Whether you're collaborating with other people driving or other management people who are shipping items, or collaborating to make a plan, to make a budget, you will always be working with people. And sometimes those people are even your family members, more often than not, probably. So it is important to know collaboration. That's something we should be focusing on in the classroom. So if you hate group projects, that's what they're for, at the very least. And even if they don't do a good job of putting people together that can actually accomplish a task together, it's at least for a purpose. And I think that's something that we need to work on, that I'm somewhat grateful the education system at least includes for now. Okay. And then we get into things like languages. And these are kind of strange because languages are everywhere. Language and arts are everywhere from the very basics that we need to know all the way up to the most advanced things. Because art is a form of relaxation, it's a form of self-expression. And because we exist and because we think, we need to be able to express ourselves. And that comes across in music, that comes across in poetry and writing, in even talking. If you can talk eloquently, if you can talk in a way that makes people listen to you, that makes people want to pay attention, that's much more engaging, that's important, because then you can actually get your ideas across. So that's something we need to learn. And then if you're talking about language in the sense of who else can I talk with, well, America is becoming increasingly diverse. And we have, for the entire history of this country, had people from all over the world here. And that includes Native Americans, that includes people coming from South America, from Europe, from Africa, from Asia, from the South Pacific. So you may, and probably very much should, be learning at least one other language. And my experience has not taken me to many countries outside of Europe, but in Europe, it's very clear that everyone knows at least one other language aside from the language of their home country. And many countries have more than one language spoken in them. It's not surprising. Like Belgium has, what do you call it? Oh my gosh, is it Flanders and French? And forgive me if I'm wrong on that. But point being, it's two halves of countries speaking two different languages, but they do need to know the other languages if they're going to get around. And in America, there's a lot of southern regions that speak Spanish. And in the north, they traditionally taught French because you had a lot of French Canadians and French emigres in the region. So it's not surprising that we should know these languages if we want to communicate. I mean, if your customers are going to be speaking Spanish, what are you going to say? No, I'm not going to sell to you. Don't you want money? If you want money, you're going to work with them to make sure that you can make money. And I think that's pretty practical. And in a more humanitarian way, we should all be a little bit more friendly and open to the fact that our language is not the only language, and that most of us can't even speak our native language all that well. So, moving on, and well, actually, as an addition to that, right, languages follow you all the way up to the top. If you want to make clients in China, if you want to make clients in another country, you need to be able to communicate with them. Or at the very least, you need to know technical language or legal language, because we're all going to be signing leases. We're all going to be writing like some sort of technical document, some sort of report on what we've done in our lives, whether it be at work or family or for school. So those are all things that we need to know how to do. And I'm sure by now you've probably figured out this video is not a, hey, here are the 10 topics you need to teach in school, and here's how to do it, and move on with your lives. No, this kind of video is meant to open this can of worms because it's huge. It's an entire grocery store's worth of stuff inside one can. So we need to be aware of what sort of subjects we need to teach, and then we need to break it down and actually work on making those priorities and figuring out how to implement them. The first step is having this conversation of what should we be doing differently. And the second and third and fourth and fifth conversations are how do we make it happen? So this is not going to be a thing that solves the education system, but it's going to be a very important first step or next step. So to kind of start to close this topic off, a few things more we need to talk about are the arts, history, politics, and literature, and sciences and statistics. So arts, like I said, at the lower levels, it's just about maintaining yourself, being able to express yourself. But at the higher levels, it's a way that we comment on society. One of the best ways to look for public opinion on things that are happening in an era is to look at the art produced in that time. If you go to an art museum, many of the pieces that you'll see will reflect the urban metropolis of growing New York City in the American atmosphere, or you'll see the French Revolution, or you'll see Renaissance paintings depicting Christ and depicting religion. And so it gives you a very clear understanding of what's important in that time. And art and history record keeping tie right together. We need to know what was happening in an era. We need to know the designs and history from that era, because if we're going to keep making new technology, we better not go in circles. We better learn something from technology that's been made in the past and has failed if we're going to go forwards with it, so that we don't make the same mistakes. And we need to learn how people felt about politics and policies, because eventually those policies that were made 300 years ago are going to come back up, like things that are in the American Constitution are coming back up today. And we have to ask ourselves, is this still useful? And if not, how do we change it? And if we don't know the American history that led up to them making the decision to put that law in, then we don't know how to act on changing it if we need to, or decide to keep it. So that's kind of arts. It's a commentary on society, but it's also a way to maintain yourself. Then, if we're talking history and politics, we need to understand how we vote, how to make political change. And something I keep hearing more and more recently is that like local government is one of the best ways to be represented, because you're not caught in a sea of, in the United States, 350 plus million people that you're fighting against to get your way. You're working against maybe a couple thousand, or if you're part of a club, like maybe 10, 15 people. So it's important to be politically active, even at lower levels, politically active in what your company is deciding to do, in what your club at school is trying to do, right? They all have leadership boards. You need to be able to give your opinion and help figure out the direction it should go in. And then we also need to talk about like governmental structure. How do we change things that have been around for forever so that they still work in favor of the people? You don't want to devise something and then 100 years later, 1,000 years later, it's a horrible system for the people that exist then. You want to be able to design something that can grow and change as the people grow and change. So you don't wind up stuck in the past, having issues that could have been resolved already. And then history teaches us how to move forward. Like I've said before, you need to understand what happened in the past to understand how you're going to move forward, how to understand how we got to the present, to understand what needs to change. And the last thing I'll talk about is this level of like self-actualization. Abraham Maslow was a psychologist, and one of the things that he did was create this pyramid. It's kind of like the food pyramid that tells you like when humans are able to take care of their basic needs, they start focusing on like love and compassion. And when they have their love and compassion needs taken care of, they're able to start working on what they actually want to do with their lives. And then so on and so forth, all the way up to self-actualization. And self-actualization is having a solid understanding of yourself and how you fit in with society and others, and what your wants and desires are, and what your ethics are. And ethics is a huge point here, because it technically applies to us at the lowest levels. How much should you get paid if you're a worker? How much should you be allowed to eat? How much should you be able to buy to make sure that you can take care of yourself? And if you're not able to meet those basic needs, you can't meet the top needs. But the people who are at the top tend to control what people at the bottom get, right? If you're Jeff Bezos, you've got literally billions of dollars, then you have a very large say in how much the people at Amazon make. You have a very large say in how much the people at Amazon make that affects directly how much they can buy, if they can support their family, where they can live. So it is important that the people at the top understand the needs of the people, not only at the bottom, but the people around them and the people in their society and their world. Because there's so much trade that happens across borders. There's so many policies that affect us all. There's things that affect our, like, how we decide to interact with one another. We interact with people from other countries on social media all the time. So it's important that we understand what's going on in those countries too. And in that way, you're not just a citizen of your country, but a citizen of the world. And you need to have an understanding of how we can all communicate, of what's going on in the world, so that we can act on it. And in this higher way, you're able to also look at science, statistics, and literature. We need to understand what artists, and I'm talking about art in the written sense, the musical sense, the everything sense, what they are saying, because they are talking about public opinion, like I said, right? If we listen to Kanye's music, if we listen to Zakarian music, like these bands, these people are talking about experiences in their own life that reflect the world around us. If we want things not only to change, but if we want to live the life like a superstar lives, listen to their songs and actually understand what they're saying, right? If you want to, live a great life that looks exactly like someone else's life, you need to understand them to be able to follow their example. If you want to be a best-selling artist or author, you need to be able to understand what makes those authors great. So then we move forward into sciences. If we want to make any sort of informed decision about medical consent, if we want to make it about abortion, if we want to make it about how much cancer treatment should cost, what kind of medicines we need, what kind of painkillers are open to the public, how fast the disease spreads. These are all things that we need to know based on the numbers and on personal experience. But one of the things we've neglected up until this point is the numbers. People throw around statistics all the time, but you need to understand how the numbers affect you, what they actually mean mathematically. What does it mean for 37% of people to do something? Is that important that 1/3 of people do that? That you understand that 37% is about 1/3? Is it important that if they say 95% of people do something, is that considerably important? 95% of people get less than 6 hours of sleep a night? I don't know if that's the case. My point is, if you hear that, are you like, either people don't actually need that much sleep, or we should all be getting more sleep and there's something going on here that's making us all lose sleep, like overworking. But if you don't know how to process statistics, if you don't know that 95% is most of the bell curve and that it should really only be 50% or less if it's not a problem, then these are things we need to understand more with time. And so statistics is another thing that I think should very much be taught in schools, because it's going to affect you, it's going to affect your policy, it's going to affect the decisions you make if you decide to get vaccinated or not for something. And yeah, then the last thing is science, right? We've come full circle. If you are a person using technology, if you're using a building, you need to know how things in it work, but also you need to understand how things work if you're going to be the one making them. And a lot of us in our lives will produce some sort of art, will produce writing, will produce designs, we'll learn to woodwork, we'll knit, we'll make arts and crafts with our kids, right? There's so many different ways that we will use our skills, and we need to understand how these materials work together. What is it that makes a crayon write on paper? Well, it's friction that makes the wax in the crayon wear into the paper. But if you don't know that, then how are you supposed to make changes to it, right? How are you supposed to mix colors? There's color theory behind that. There's science that then goes into, well, if I want to become a biologist, I need to know how cells work. I need to know how my body works. And these are all things that we talked about learning at a smaller level, right? How do you take care of your own health? How do you understand statistics? How do you understand mathematics and an economy? These are all sciences because they're studies, they're economy, they're biology, the ology, the study of something. And so when we move forwards, we come full circle. Like I said, if you're at the self-actualization level, you need to actually be able to understand what's going on for the rest of society in a small and detailed way. And so that's something that I've had the good fortune as a mechanical engineering student to have learned. But I think it applies to all of us. Like, I've learned how things are machined, and that's something I'd love to talk to you guys about, is how everything in the world around us is made by man. And it sounds crazy, but when you think about it, like the seeds that were planted for even the shrubbery and the trees and stuff outside of your house, those were planted by man. The zoning was done by people. The buildings and stuff that you live in were not only built by people, but designed by people, and all the materials were made by people and invented by people. The meats and everything that you eat, the vegetables, they're all grown by people, they're processed by people. And that's just, it's important to understand that if we're affecting every part of the world around us, we need to understand how we can change our effect on it, and how we even build things in the present, right? If you want to go work as an engineer and design in a packing plant or something, then it's important that you understand how things are packaged. Even if you're not going to change what's packaged, the way things are packaged, you need to understand how it's currently done so you can keep doing it, so you can do your job in a way that's not going to get you fired. We can't expect our employers to teach us everything, because when you go to work at a place, they ask you, hey, what do you already know? And if you say nothing, I'm expecting you to teach me, well, that's not all that useful for them. So, point is, there's many, many roles that we will play in society. And so if we're going to build an effective education system, we need to start at the bottom. Meet the needs that everyone needs to know. Just how to eat, how to manage finances, how to take care of ourselves. And then we move up a level. We want to be good citizens, we want to be good workers, because society does need people to do things, right? So we need to know how our government works, we need to know how to run an economy, and how to actually work like technical skills, take care of our houses, and work like some more basic jobs and understand literature and reading and communicating. Then if we start moving up, we move into technical skills. We need to know sciences, statistics, mathematics, to understand how we can process everything. And then we need to focus on self-actualization. How do we learn the things that affect the entire world, from the bottom to the top? And so that's where I'll end the topic. And I'm really grateful if you guys have stuck around, watch this. And I'd love to know what you guys think on this topic. I want to keep exploring it, because this is the first step. It's not the last one. We need to keep moving forwards if our kids are going to have a better education system than we did. And even if you're in school right now, if you're going to have an education that is better tomorrow than it was today. So I'll leave you with that. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys down in the comments.